Welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast, where business leaders come to share their advice and journeys to success with existing and emerging leaders of America. Now, here's your host, Dylan Bloyd.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Business Leaders of America podcast. Today, I'm joined by Seth Bader, founding attorney and CEO of Bader Law Injury Lawyers, a leading personal injury and workers' compensation firm based in Georgia. Over the course of his career, Seth has grown Bader Law into an organization of more than 150 professionals that has represented over 50,000 clients and recovered more than $350 million for injured Georgians. Beyond practicing law, Seth is also an author and thought leader who shares his experience in entrepreneurship, leadership, and building a successful law firm. In this conversation, we'll talk about Seth's entrepreneurial journey, the lessons he's learned building and leading Bader Law, and how he thinks about leadership, purpose, and building a life beyond business. Seth, welcome to the show.
Dylan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get to speak with you, man. So, Seth, before we get into Bader Law, can you take us back to, 2008? You started the firm with $5,000, a laptop, your bulldog, right? And a one-bedroom apartment. So what did those first 12 months actually look like? And what did you have to figure out simply to survive and get the firm off the ground?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was messy. I'll start there, right? I think when you start something new, even if you have a very clear vision, I think the execution can be very, very messy, particularly when you're starting any business, because you have to be very resourceful. You literally have to be very scrappy. And so I think that, and you don't have the benefit of having resources, whether it's capital, whether it's people, whether it's technology. So naturally, it is going to be messy. So I would say the first 12 months, they were exciting. I still look back with, probably like most business owners and entrepreneurs, with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of I appreciate that time in the journey, but it was definitely messy.
Yeah, no, I believe it. Was there a time where, during that 12 months where you thought you were like, maybe I should just do something else. This just is not going to, work out, and then thought, or did you always have confidence that it was going to work out?
I think naturally you have different emotions and different, you go through different waves. I never really doubted it enough to seriously think about it. In other words, those doubts creep in. You wonder, did I make the right decision? Did I not? But never enough to where I really gave it thought. And I was so busy trying to build something that there was just not a lot of time to give to those kinds of doubts. But, naturally you do wonder at times, is it worth it? I think that's really the question, is not, can I do it? Is it worth it? I think it's the question to ask yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like you said, I'm sure you look back and you're like, yes, it was worth it, and with everything you've accomplished, it's pretty incredible, man. But, before starting Bader Law, you also spent several years representing insurance companies, handling thousands of claims from their side of the table, right? So what did that experience teach you about how insurance companies evaluate claims, and how that inside perspective influenced the way you approach cases today?
Yeah, no question. As an insurance defense attorney, you learn the tricks of the trade, so to speak. You learn what it is that they do, and why they do it, and how they do it. And I think that it is, for someone like me, while I was doing it, I didn't get a lot of satisfaction, because I felt like I was really harming a lot of very innocent people. At the same time, it was incredibly valuable. It was a very, very valuable education. I was essentially getting paid to learn what I needed to do when I switched sides, when I opened my own practice. And I think that kind of information and insight is invaluable. And it's not something you can get in a textbook. It's not really something you can't get it on this side of the aisle, so to speak, right? I mean, this you can learn a lot, but you can't learn how the insurance companies think and how they operate the same way you can when you're actually thinking like them and aligned with them, as I was for about 5 or 6 years.
Right. Was there a time frame of how long you wanted to keep doing that before you wanted to start your own? Was there always a goal in mind of starting your own thing?
I think I wouldn't say that there was a specific time frame, and frankly, th- th- I did that initially. I can't say that I did that like strategically, like let me go
Got it.
do this with the intention of switching sides later. When you're leaving school and you don't have a job and you don't have the resources to start a firm, one way to start is to take an opportunity that, you know, that you might not otherwise have taken. And I took that opportunity and I learned. And then when I was doing it, I always knew that I wanted to have my own business. I always knew that I wanted to control my own destiny. I always knew that I wanted to build something, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to build, or when I would do it. But I think as time went on, I realized that there was an opportunity, there was a space for someone like me to step in and do the work that I do in my opinion, at a better level, more caring, more committed, and more focused. And so I think after about 5 years, I realized that opportunity was there, and I needed to take it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gave you that time to learn, like you said, and understand what, is going to go, what the ins and outs are going to be of starting your own thing, right? And not a lot of people have that opportunity. So it's great that you had that. But, you ultimately made the decision, right, to leave the insurance side and start Bader Law. So,
Hmm.
focusing on your career on representing individual or injured individuals and families, right? So what was happening in your career and in your thinking at that point that made you realize this was the direction you wanted to take?
Yeah, I think just my makeup is to help people, right? I mean, for me, I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference, and I wanted to give people a voice. I
Yeah.
wanted to give them, the representation, the advocacy that I thought that they deserved. There's a lot of lawyers in this country. Um, there's a lot of good ones, but there's also a lot of really bad ones. And I felt like there was an opportunity for there was room for another good lawyer, for another caring lawyer that could come in, and I really wanted to make a difference. And I think that the interesting thing about representing people, injured people, is you really get an opportunity to utilize different skills. Like it's like as a lawyer, you use critical thinking, you analyze, you identify issues, you make arguments. But as a lawyer who represents injured people, you also have to build the relationships. You have to really understand people. You have to be empathetic and caring. You have to really enjoy communication. And so for me, I just felt like there was an opportunity. I think a lot of lawyers that do this are very transactional in nature, and I don't think this is a transactional business. There are a lot of transactional businesses. There's a lot of transactional lawyers, but that's not this kind of work. When you represent injured people, whether it's a car accident, whether it's a work related accident, um, you need to be able to combine both skill sets, the human relationship skill set, as well, and communication, as well as sort of having legal acumen and understanding how to make arguments under the law.
Right. Yeah. I mean, has it been difficult as you've scaled? Because again, your organization is up to what, 150 professionals. You represent over 50,000 clients. So individually, I feel like it might be a little bit easier to really tailor. Not just tailor, but also put a lot of care towards those individuals, right? But as you grow, is it difficult to kind of keep that same care as all for all of your clients? Because at some point, it can't all go through you, right?
Yeah, I definitely think scaling a professional service business is harder than scaling a retail business. I say
Mhm.
that, and you probably know a lot of people in the retail space, and I don't know that space, and so I don't want to suggest that it's easy because I don't know it. But what I will say is that it's one thing to scale a system, technology, subscription models, but it's another thing altogether to scale a professional service where not everybody comes with the same skill set, with the
Yeah.
same care. It's very, very hard to systematize that. I think in order to scale that, you need to have the system you need to have in place is one where you can hire the right people and
Yeah.
or train the right people to perform to a certain standard. And that is certainly a big challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think each, industry, poses its own challenges, of course, but at the same time, like you said, I mean, people's lives can be changed, overnight with what you guys are handling, right? And so, when you're doing subscription-based businesses, of course, yes, challenges, but at the same time, can be completely different of what you guys are having to really take care of. I always like to ask guests this, when they hired their first, person, bring someone else onto the team. Was it difficult to kind of let them go and do their own thing, or did you feel like you had to almost micromanage in a way?
Well, I think when I look back, I didn't go into it with a plan, like to let go or not to let go. I think when I first hired the person, he kind of became an apprentice in a way. Like I didn't think of it like that. It was certainly was not like, hey, I'm going to build this apprenticeship model. It was like, I just needed help. I could only do so much. And I brought somebody in who had a great work ethic, great character, very, very smart, and knew enough about the law to where I could train him. And so the way that it worked was it really wasn't micromanagement. It really was mentorship.
Yeah.
Um, but then once he established that he could do it on his own and I didn't have the bandwidth anymore, then I just I let him do his thing. And because we had such a good working relationship, I trusted him enough to come to me when he didn't know the answer.
hmm
And I will say that I was extremely lucky with him, but I don't like I've now employed hundreds of other people, and dozens of other lawyers, and and some really phenomenal ones, by the way.
Yeah.
But he was very, very unique, in his willingness to learn, and his patience. I think a lot of folks in this industry and outside of this industry are so hungry to grow, so ambitious, which are great qualities, but sometimes it's like they want to do it so fast that they don't really invest the time to learn the craft.
Yeah.
And he was one that did. And while I'm disappointed to say he's no longer with us, I'm very, very proud. I mean, he was with us for about a decade. And he went on to start his own firm, and he does phenomenal work, and actually still refer him business here and there. So,
Yeah.
so it's been a source of pride for me to see him and others, grow and develop, whether they're inside my firm or they've gone on to other opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. See, and that's sometimes where I think that, maybe your mindset is a little bit different than others because yes, it's as tough as it is to lose great people. At the same time, you want to see them grow, right? And if they've hit their ceiling, it's great to see them being able to go and become successful, right? But speaking of challenges, as the firm expanded, you encountered some challenges around the way the organization was operating and ultimately made the decision to rebuild around stronger systems, accountability, culture, and purpose, right? So looking back at your experience, what did it teach you about recognizing when something that worked previously is no longer working? And then not only that, but also having the willingness to, change it.
Yeah. I think it's Marshall Goldsmith who wrote the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There,
Mm,
something like that. Right. And,
yeah.
I mean, the reality is that in life and in business, you have to adapt, you have to change. And what worked for you what worked for me when I was a solo operator with a bulldog out of a 1-bedroom apartment with $5,000 to my name was not the same thing that worked for me when I had to bring on that employee that we were just talking about. And what
Right.
worked for us then when we were a small boutique where he could be an apprentice is not what's going to work for you when you are scaling really, really fast and you don't have the time to be able to commit to all of those people at the same time. So I think certainly one of the hardest lessons for me, and one of the most important lessons is how do you change? How do you evolve, in a way that is good for the business, but also good for the people, and where the people can understand and appreciate that these changes are being done for them, not being done to them. And
Mm,
I say that, and I'm aware of it, and yet it's not easy to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think a big issue with it is just people, like the way they've always done things, right? And then having to adapt and having to, change is difficult. It's not easy, especially with the people who have been there for a long period of time, right? And so, but understanding that if you want to grow, you want to get to new heights, of course, you do have to make those changes and things like that, right? So, beyond running Bader Law, you've also built a platform through writing and your thought leadership. What made you want to start sharing the business side of your experience, and what have you learned from putting your own ideas and experiences out there publicly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I enjoy giving back. I've done that since I started.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, it's really, really rewarding to share the knowledge that I've acquired. I mean, I just personally am gratified by doing that, but I think in the process, it also helps me grow and helps me learn. And I love sharing ideas with other people. And I think I feel like most business owners and entrepreneurs can appreciate this, that, when you start out, you're looking for people to
Yeah.
give back and to help you. And I found that there were a lot of people willing to do that. And I was surprised because I didn't really have anything to give to them.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that they were giving back to me because somebody gave to them. And I think that
Mm.
I feel that same sort of sense of obligation and responsibility to do the same thing. But I just honestly, I love learning. I love growing. I love sharing, exchanging ideas. Um, and so for me, it's just very fulfilling to do that.
No, it absolutely is. I think I'm a part of a network who, when you first start, they ask you for, you have a ask and you have a give, right? And so what you can ask from the network and then what you can give to the network. And lots of times the people who are, when they're giving, it's a lot less than what they're asking, right? And so, but there's so many people out there, exactly what you mentioned is, mentors out there and people who are willing to share their expertise. And I love that you're doing that because it's needed. And I think that the big issue is that people have the misconception of, why would they want to help me because I don't have something to give, like you
Yeah.
mentioned.
Yeah. I think a lot of people misunderstand and misconstrue entrepreneurs and business owners. I think that, there are certain people that are in it for the money. And
Yeah.
if that's all you're in it for, I'm not saying that that's wrong. At the end of the day, most of us are in for-profit businesses. But I think people assume that there's like, that being a business owner is selfish. Like,
Yeah.
this is all about me, when it's not. It's really about making an impact. It's about changing the world. It's about hopefully doing things at a higher standard and
Hmm.
creating opportunities for other people. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I think for me, I probably get as much or more joy out of just collaborating and sharing ideas with other people as I do in the business itself. I mean, I think one of the challenges, particularly in my industry, is that a lot of people don't like to share.
Yeah.
They are very, they have a very, a scarcity mindset. And so instead of realizing that there's so much opportunity for all of us in exchanging ideas and seeing how we can all up level each other, people want to like retain whatever knowledge they have, as if somehow that is going to protect them from, but
Yeah.
there's so many people in this industry, and so, and in all industries, and everybody's out there trying to compete and to learn and to win. And at this point, frankly, the access to information is so much greater than it
Yeah.
was when I started. And so, yeah, I think that again, for me, it's all about learning. It's about growing. It's about sharing. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because I actually spoke with, this has probably been a year and a half, where I interviewed another individual in that space, right, and a lawyer who mentioned that when he was first getting started, the people that he reached out to in the area made it extremely difficult for him to enter the space, because they just didn't want
Mhm.
competition for one, or they wanted to harness the information they had, and they didn't want to, it was part of their secret sauce, right? And I understand you probably don't want competition, you don't want to have to fight for clients and things like that, but if you're good at what you do, you're going to get clients. You're going to get people to come your way.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And look, I think part of my success, part of my growth was that I wasn't getting mentorship and support from people locally, and so I was searching out in 2013. I was searching information, so anything
Mm.
I could get my hands on, I did. Any conferences I could attend, and so I would attend some different conferences, which now have become like commonplace. I mean, there's a conference every week in our industry. At the time, it seemed like there was about 2 or 3 a year.
Mm.
And nobody really knew about them because we didn't have as much access to social media. So you kind of had to know somebody who knew somebody else. And so, yeah. And so I searched this out, and I fortunately in our industry, if you know people outside of your sort of area who you're directly competing with, oftentimes they're willing to exchange ideas because they themselves, were in the same position as, say, me or others, where they wanted to share ideas and get feedback, but people within their communities in their cities or states weren't exchanging ideas. So you end up joining networks of other like-minded business owners and firm owners to share ideas.
Right. So knowing what you know now, do you believe it would be a little bit easier to enter the space at this point with all the information out there? Or do you feel like it would be a little bit more difficult?
That's a loaded question. I mean, is
Yeah.
it easier to enter the space? Yes, it is. Is it a different space to enter, and is it harder today in other respects? Yes. So I think where it's easier is that, number one, you have social media. So I think for, the idea of building a personal brand is not something that I'm not going to say it didn't exist, but to be able to build it at scale is not something you could do when I started my business in 2008. Certainly not for free, right? I mean, your options were to pay somebody to have a website, to go on TV, to put an ad in, literally in the yellow pages. I mean,
Yeah.
I was at the very end of that. Like the first time I ever saw an iPhone, I was getting pitched on you're too young, but like getting pitched on the yellow pages, and the person pulled up, I'm going off on a tangent, but they got a call, and I was like, what the F is that in your hand? And they were like, well, that's an iPhone. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
And it was kind of like in that moment, I knew that the world was changing, and that the yellow pages were not going to be a thing. It was kind of like the worst thing they could do to try to sell me yellow page ads. But God, I really have dated myself. But your question, I went off on a tangent. I think that now it's easier because of social media, because you can build a brand more efficiently than you otherwise could. You can network more efficiently. Back in the day, you'd have to take people to lunches. And now you just go on LinkedIn, you go on Instagram, you comment, you create content, and to many it's free. It just takes time. I also think your access to information is much greater. There are so many conferences. Like I said, there's conferences, there's coaches, there's all kinds of stuff out there where you can learn much faster. Where it's hard is that it's not only harder for people entering the space, but it's harder for people that are already in the space, because it's a very different business. When I started to grow something big, to scale this kind of business, you needed money, and you needed courage, and you needed a willingness to play the long game. Because the marketing is very, very expensive, and it takes to actually convert your marketing dollars into ROI can take 12 to 24 months, sometimes longer, because it's not like a typical sale where you get, you literally make a sale and you get paid for it. You have to acquire a client, then you have to represent them, and then you get paid 6 to 12 months later. Right. And so it's a very unique business. And what's happened is, before, you were just competing with firms, say in Atlanta, where I'm at.
Yeah.
But now the firms in Atlanta, are not only competing with each other, but we're competing with the biggest firms from around the country that have gone multi-state. And we're not just competing against those law firms, we're competing against private equity backed law firms and private equity backed businesses that have found creative ways to enter the space. And so we're not just competing with traditional law firms, we're competing with multi-billion-dollar, financial institutions, basically, and companies that have been created to compete in the space. And then we're not only competing against them, but at the end of the day, you're competing for business. And
Yes.
so we're not just competing against law firms for business and private equity backed companies, but we're competing against multi-million-dollar marketing machines that are generating business and selling that business to law firms like myself. So you have to choose: do you want to do it all on your own, or do you want to pay third parties for? And it's tough, because if you don't do that, you leave opportunity on the table. But if you do that, you're kind of funding your competition. So so that's a long way of saying there are parts of this business that make it easier to enter, and then there are parts of it that make it hard. The cost of doing this, cost of business, of course, probably in all businesses, has gone up, but it's gone up significantly. And so you have to find new ways, going back to what we were talking about earlier, to change, to adapt and evolve so that you can still be competitive.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate you elaborating on that more, just because you're absolutely right. I think that, the marketing space is tough, as is, and like you said, if you want to stand out in the space, you have to be creative. And because if not, then you just become saturated, right? Everyone's trying to do the same thing of branding, making or creating their brand, whether in any industry. But it's like you have to figure out ways to differentiate. But I did want to talk about this a little bit, shift gears a little bit, because nearly 2 decades now that you've been building Bader Law, you also have a wife, 4 children, coach your son's baseball team, and make time for, travel and hiking outside of work. So at this stage of your career, how do you think about building a successful business while also making sure you're building a life that you can enjoy?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
So you want to know, how do you build a successful business while also building and maintaining a life you can enjoy, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in other words, like work-life balance, if there is such a thing, balancing life in best as possible.
Yeah, I've got a friend in the space who talks about work-life integration, not work-life balance, and I think that's really what it's about. I think a big part of it is finding the right partner, right? I think alignment, whether it's business, whether it's personal, is critical. And my lifestyle, my business, is definitely not for every wife or every partner, right? And I'm very fortunate. My wife is very supportive and very understanding, and gives me the space that I need to do what I do. But in return, I have to find the time and make the time for her and my kids. And we do that. It's just different. Like I think I was telling you before we got started that I was in Los Angeles for about the last week. My daughter had a dance intensive. And so while I was there, present and helping with the kids, but also, we went to Disneyland and did a few other things, there was also time for me to send emails, to come up with different initiatives, to develop a leadership program. And so it's just a matter of finding ways to integrate your work into your life and your life into your work. And so, but at the end of the day, I built this business so that I could create a life that I wanted for myself, and at the time, my future family and my future kids. And I'm still doing it at the end of the day because I want to provide for them, a great life, great experiences, great opportunity for them and for us as a family. So I think I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think the answer is it's not about balance. A long time ago, long before I had my family, I would joke that, the work-life balance is 99% work or 100% work, 0%. Right. But over time, at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're here to at least that's what I feel like I'm here for. And at the end of the day, my kids and my wife for sure come first. And I'm everything I'm doing ultimately is to support them. But I also love my work, and I love the impact I'm able to make on the clients, on the communities, and really, maybe most importantly, on the people that I work with. Right.
Yeah.
I'm extremely fulfilled by seeing other people grow, going back to that attorney that was my first employee, but beyond, just to help other people hopefully fulfill their own goals, personal and professional. And so I think that they're all, I mean, they're all equally important. Again, my family is my driving force. But I also, I'm very moved by, motivated to help the people in my firm grow and meet their own goals.
Yeah, exactly. I love that you mentioned that because it's, you're balancing the integration of your work life into your personal life, right? And that's the best part about being an entrepreneur, right? Is that you can create something like that where you can enjoy your family a little bit more, but maybe in the beginning it's a little less because you're putting countless hours, there's no 9 to 5 anymore, right? It's the hours that you decide to put in. So, getting
Yeah,
it to this point, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, there's still no 9 to 5. I mean,
You're right.
I don't. The thing is, if you love what you do, they say it's not really work, and
Yeah.
I don't really think of it as. I really genuinely don't think of it as work. It's just what I do. It's how I live. It's all about finding the balance and making sure that you can give enough to your family and to your work, but finding creative ways of doing that are maybe not the traditional sort of like 9 to 5 at work, and then the rest of the time with the family. I find creative ways to integrate all of it and get it done.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I mean, you're doing an amazing job, and you're absolutely right what you said about, loving what you do and, not working a day in your life or whatever the saying is, right? But amazing, man. I really appreciate you joining today, Seth. I did want to ask for those who want to learn more about you, Bader Law, your work with attorneys and business leaders, or follow what you're building. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
They can email me at seth@baderlaw.com. They can reach out anytime. I'm more than happy to collaborate, share ideas, whether it's an opportunity to work together, to exchange business, or just to talk. Always love learning, always love sharing. I think a lot of my lessons apply to any business, and I suspect the same would be true for other business owners. So yeah, Seth at Bader Law or baderlaw.com.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll make sure those are in the show notes, make it a little bit easier on the listeners as well. And Seth, I do really appreciate you joining today and spending time with me and the listeners.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I appreciate you very much. And yeah, thank you.